Hello, viewers. Welcome again this morning. Still at 2023 KQ. If you like it, you can call it the projections. So today we are going to do another different thing. We are going to help again the form 2s. So for the form 2s, here is a good topic for us. That is gradient and equations of straight lines. Even to our form 4s, this is a revision part for you. What a good topic for us here to go through very briefly. I'm just going to take you through key points to note in this important topic. So, under equations and gradient of straight lines, the first thing I would want all of us to know is what is gradient? Very simple. I've given you a brief. I've hit the nail on the head by not meandering around. So, gradient simply means the ratio of steepness or slopeness. That is the ratio of steepness or slope. So how do we get the ratio of slope here? The slope therefore is simply change in y over change in x. So if I have my slope here, change in y over change in x. So the slope here, how steep it is, when we are able to get the ratio of slopeness, that is simply the gradient of that slope. We get it by saying y minus y naught, y1 minus y naught all over x1 minus x naught. Yes, just a reminder, we have gone through this, but we are just stressing or reinforcing learning. So equations of a line, we all know linear equations have a general expression, and they should always take y is equal to mx plus c, where we have to know the meanings of the letters in this expression, where m, as we know, is the gradient of the line, c is the y-intercept. What do we mean by y-intercept? Is simply where the line cuts the y-axis. Here it is, where the line cuts the y-axis. Do we know the coordinates of this point, where the line cuts y-axis? Of course, that is 0y. 0y. So 0 means the coordinates of x there are usually 0, but y has a value. The same to x-intercept. So here I am explaining them that at y-intercept, x is usually 0, and therefore the coordinates are read as 0y, where y is a value, and it is usually along the y-axis. It is usually along the y-axis. The same too, at x-intercept, y is usually 0, as we can see. Here we are running along x-axis, and therefore the coordinates of y there is 0, while x has a substantial value. Another aspect I would want you to know, guys, and my students, is parallel lines and perpendicular lines. They have a connectivity. There's something unique about parallel lines that I would want you to know. And there's something also very useful under perpendicular lines that we ought to know. So if I have my 3 lines parallel, one thing we shall get in common is that they all have the same gradients, i.e. m1 is equal to m2, which is still equal to m3. And there we go. Then coming over to perpendicular lines, line 1 and line 2 meet at right angle. So we say they are normal to each other. They are perpendicular. And therefore, one thing I would want us to know as students of mathematics is that the product of their gradients is usually -1. The product of their gradients is usually -1. So guys, these are 3 or 4 sections I would want you to know. If you know these sections, then we can conclude that you know the topic and you are very well conversant with that topic. Going over to the other side, there's one more aspect I would want you to know for the lovers of maths. An angle that a line makes with the x-axis. I know most of us, the teachers, we may always not go through this with the learners, but it's a very important aspect also. I would not want to close the chapter without mentioning. So here is my illustration. So taking this theta as the angle, let me just produce a right angle triangle there. So employing the SOHCAHTOA, I would want to use tan. Tan theta. How do we get tan theta? OA, that is opposite over adjacent. So what is the opposite here? The opposite would be represented by the change in y, that is the change along y-axis, while on the lower side we have the change along x, that is x naught to x1. X naught to x1. Of course, here we have y1 and y naught down here. So therefore, we would have the opposite as change in y over change in x, which is the adjacent. So, and therefore, coming to gradient, how do we always get gradient of such a line? Therefore, gradient is still change in y over change in x. So we find the two things are correlated and they are the same. Therefore, it implies that when I get tan of theta, it's like talking about the gradient. It's an equivalent of the gradient of the line. So this is the law that I really would not want to close the chapter without telling my learners that given a line, we are finding the angle that a line makes with the x-axis. Very simple. And remember here I'm talking about an acute angle. So the angle theta will be tan of that angle. It's usually the gradient. So if I have the gradient, what do? It therefore means that the tan inverse of the gradient is now the angle. The tan inverse of the gradient is now the angle. So that is very important to note, please, guys. Follow through. These are the four concepts that when you master, then you will be good to go in the whole topic. Remember one, I said you have to know what a gradient is, which is simply the ratio of steepness of the slope or the slope of the line. Then, which is usually gotten by change in y over change in x. We all know that. The general expression of straight lines, y is equal to mx plus c. We have to know the meaning of the expression. M, gradient, c, y-intercept, and y-intercept is where the line cuts that particular axis, the same to that of x. Do we know the coordinates? For the y-intercept, it shall read 0y, and for x-intercept, it shall read x0, where x and y are integers. Then we went to parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines have the same gradient, while perpendicular lines, the product of their gradients is usually -1. And lastly, we have also looked at an angle that a line makes with the x-axis, which is a very important aspect again that I would want you to add unto your knowledge. So we find that the tan of that angle is the same as the gradient. And that is all. Thank you, guys. Subscribe. This is prepared by the Beacon Master. This is prepared by the Beacon Master in helping our learners to make a difference. You can contact the Beacon Master at 0720 968517. You can WhatsApp me anytime and we will help to see a change in our learners. Thank you, guys. Let's subscribe, let's share, and thank you very much.